Hello, I'm Richard GIZBERT, and you're at the Listening Post. We've got something a little bit different on the broadcast this week, a special edition dedicated to the media they didn't want us to see. They, in this case, being the military, the government, big business, or even big media. This is no imagined conspiracy. On this show, they will all be found guilty of hiding, suppressing, or censoring the truth in order to protect their own interests. We'll be looking at a medley of stories, some of which you may have already seen, plus some new ones. The first piece comes from our very first episode of the Listening Post. It's about the White House, fallen soldiers, and the public's right to know. In 2003, the Bush administration reintroduced a ban that had been set aside in the first stages of the fighting in Afghanistan. The Pentagon announced it would be illegal to photograph or film flag-draped coffins of fallen soldiers returning from the war. So there are no pictures on American television at all. But you can see them on the web at a site called The Memory Hole. The independent journalist who runs it, Russ Kick, did what no network or newspaper managed to do. He got the images just by asking the military under the U.S. Freedom of Information Act. And you can see those images on a music video. Neil Young mocked the policy, the president behind it, and the news organizations who seem content to live with it. Across the border in Canada, the Conservative government also tried to restrict coverage, but military families fought back.
All soldiers give their lives for all of Canada. So I think 30 million people owe them a debt of gratitude, and 30 million people have the right to see them come home.
The government backed down. Together, in less than a month, pressure from two families and the Canadian media managed to reverse a policy that the U.S. media has lived with for years. Hajar Smouni is at Reporters Without Borders in Paris, an organization that fights for press freedom all over the world.
In our latest ranking, the annual Press Freedom Index, in the 2006 index, the United States have ranked 53rd. In 2002, when we established this ranking, the United States were ranked 17th. So you can see that in 4 years, in 5 years, they've lost so many places.
With their reputation as fearless seekers of the truth damaged, the U.S. news media have started to fight back. Take these two stories. When they first appeared, the media told us that a female soldier went down fighting and a heroic ex-football player was killed by the Taliban. Since then, the stories have reappeared in a completely different form.
Still here with you, Jessica.
Make sure we get a good count, guys, as she comes in. So 3-0.
These are the images the Pentagon showed the world in 2003 of the rescue of Private Jessica Lynch. And this is what we were told about her.
Hard as nails. That's what they're saying about Private First Class Jessica Lynch.
She shot until she ran out of ammunition.
Recently, a new, longer version of the rescue tape surfaced on the internet. It showed a young American traumatized in her hospital bed, shaken by the sound of distant gunfire.
It's okay, it's okay. You know?
Jessica Lynch never claimed to be the hero the U.S. media described her as.
At my parents' home in Wirt County, West Virginia, it was understaged by media, all repeating the story of the little girl Rambo from the hills of West Virginia who went down fighting. It was not true.
1 year after the Lynch rescue, Pat Tillman was killed in Afghanistan. The U.S. military said he was shot by Taliban fighters. That's the way the story was reported, and the death of the football player who gave up millions to join the so-called war on terror was huge news in America.
At his memorial service in 2004, which was televised live from coast to coast, Pat Tillman was honored for giving his life for his country.
There was one small problem with the narrative, however. It was utter fiction.
Tillman's brother Kevin and his family later learned he was killed by friendly fire, mistakenly shot by his comrades. It was April 2004. The Abu Ghraib story was breaking. The war in Iraq was not going well.
Revealing that Pat's death was a fratricide would have been yet another political disaster during a month already swollen with political disasters, and the brutal truth that the American public would undoubtedly find unacceptable. So the facts needed to be suppressed. An alternative narrative had to be constructed.
In times of war, there are all kinds of reasons for the government to censor media, the most often quoted being for the purposes of national security. But that did not wash for the reporter who uncovered our next piece of news that they didn't want us to see. At issue is another military cover-up, one that extends beyond the U.S. to its ally, Britain. In 2003, British soldier Matty Hull became a victim of friendly fire, killed by his allies, American fighter pilots.
I understand that was north 800 meters?
For 4 years, his widow Susan was kept in the dark as to what really happened, until February of this year, when the actual cockpit video was leaked to the press.
Roll up your right wing and look right underneath you. I know what you're talking about. Okay, well, they have orange rockets on them. Orange rockets? Yeah, I think so.
The video reveals, in a tragic way, the pilots' laid-back confusion about the identity of their target. And for the UK coroner Andrew Walker, it became crucial evidence. Tom Newton-Dunn is the Sun newspaper's defense editor.
Rarely, if ever, do you get such an extraordinary, up-close and very, very personal viewpoint on a tragedy unfolding. And it's a very, appallingly sad and quite moving thing to watch.
Get it.
The moment the A-10 comes in, strafes not once but twice the convoy in his normal sort of gun-ho fashion and with the gun-ho language he uses. But you're extremely well aware that down there at the end of his TV screen there are people dying. So I mean, you're watching a British soldier's death for one thing, which is not a pleasant experience.
For the pilots, the realization came all too late.
The 3122 and 3222 grid box, you have friendly armor in the area, yellow small armored tanks, just be advised.
When the Sun decided to publish the story, it got a phone call from the British government.
It was obvious that they wanted us not to run it, we wanted to run it. So there was quite a strong exchange of views. It ended up with the Secretary of State for Defence ringing my editor in her office over there, not really doing himself too many favours. His one and only real tactics was trying to persuade her that she had no idea whether it was genuine, therefore shouldn't run it. At no stage did he really try and pretend, I suppose to his credit, that this thing was in any way damaging to national security. We didn't fall for that for 1 second, and the truth did out.
Your mission, you've got, looks like we may have a blue-on-blue situation. God bless it!
In March 2007, the coroner returned a verdict that Lance Corporal Hull's killing was unlawful.
It was what we waited 4 years to hear, and mixed today. Great sense of relief that it's over. What that means for us is that it was entirely avoidable. His death was entirely avoidable, and tinged with sadness too.
One thing we stress here on the Listening Post is the importance of new media in defining today's media landscape. We now turn to how new technologies are helping to break stories, reopening the floodgates of news that they didn't want us to see.
Governments are used to censor the traditional media. It's easy to control, for example, a newspaper, because you know the journalist, you know the editor, and it's easy to censor. But when it comes to the internet, it's a media which is, of course, more difficult to tame, because everybody can become a publisher. You, me, and non-professional, what we call citizen journalists.
Sticking for the moment to the war in Iraq, we all remember these images, the capture of Saddam Hussein from his spider hole. Well, these were the official pictures, and they might have been all that we had to go on if one soldier hadn't uploaded his own photographs onto a website called military.com.
Enough, my assistant came in and said, we have a general from Baghdad calling you. And he said, we want to talk to you because, military.com is supportive of the troops, and I wanted to ask you to take the picture down because they thought that the photo looked like the military was, doing something not in keeping with the Geneva Convention. I think a soldier had his foot on Saddam or something like that. And I said, well, General, the story's out. It's on ABC News, it's on Drudge, it's on a lot of other places.
Soldier photographs are just the beginning of the media revolution on the ground in Iraq. Blogs, soldier cams, videos filmed on mobile phones, All of them have changed our war coverage beyond recognition. It wasn't until the Pentagon slapped a ban on soldier access to sites like YouTube and MySpace that the tide of information slowed. But the mother of all pieces of citizen video has got to be this one. It comes from one of the guards at the execution of Saddam Hussein and was instantly burned into the memory banks of anybody who watched it. First, we saw the official video of the moments just prior to Saddam Hussein's hanging, run by all the major broadcasters.
This, then, is how it ended. In a grimy execution block surrounded by guards in balaclavas, Saddam Hussein appeared calm and quiet as he was prepared for death.
Then, a few days later, this version, filmed on a mobile phone with all of the taunting and the insults. It told a different story. For Hayden Hewitt, founder of LiveLeak.com, the unofficial video was big news.
When the Saddam Hussein video hit, we catapulted up to, I think, according to online sources, roughly the 276th most popular site on the internet. And ever since there's been film, there's been recordings of executions. If you look at the Nuremberg trials, they were all filmed, they were all made available to the public, these hangings of well-known figures. But I think this is the first time it's really happened in our generation on such a scale and such a well-known figure, regardless how demonized or anything else.
At the same time as the leaked video appeared online, President George Bush was forced onto the back foot. This is how Dubai TV saw President Bush's first public appearance after the execution.
In his first international appearance after the Christmas holidays, Bush chose to avoid commenting on the circumstances under which the execution took place. He turned his back to a journalist who asked him if he believed the execution was carried out appropriately.
Americans were among those shocked by what the cell phones saw. Retired NBC anchorman Tom Brokaw is considered by many in the U.S. to be an eminent journalist.
You know, as we portray ourselves around the world as the champions of democracy and the rule of law, and then to say that we're going to install in Iraq a judicial system and a democratic form of government and have something that resembled the worst kind of nightmare out of the old American West.
It looks like the internet has ushered in a whole new age of raw, unfettered media, but we have to ask ourselves if that'll continue. In the next part of this broadcast, we look at countries where a total ban on critical reporting has led to restrictions on all kinds of media, including on the net.
Any repressive government around the world is now trying to put its grip on the internet and to try to fight back against bloggers and citizen journalists who are circulating the news, the independent news that the journalist no longer provides.